All right, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from in the world, and welcome to Crazy Talk. If this is your first time joining us for Crazy Talk is a Facebook Live TV show where I interview all sorts of people about all sorts of things related to mental health. I'm your host, Lee Thomas. If this is not your first time watching Crazy Talk, thank you so much for coming back. I'm glad we haven't scared you off. I'm really excited for this week, despite having some technical difficulties. I'm super excited for this week's guest because this week we are being joined by Maya Northen. Augelli is a mental health, suicide prevention, and chronic illness advocate who lives with rapid cycling cyclothymia, anxiety, IBS, and migraines. After being diagnosed with cyclothymia at age 29, Maya began sharing her story on her personal blog and social media in hopes that by speaking out about her struggles and experiences, she would help others to feel less alone and to help break down the stigma surrounding mental health and chronic illness. She also started a closed Facebook group for mood disorders to give others a safe space to share their stories, ask questions, or just reach out if they need a virtual ear. In 2016, Maya took her advocacy a step further by starting the Spread Hope Project, which focuses on helping fellow advocates, student groups, and small organizations promote their advocacy efforts, awareness events, social media campaigns, and more. Maya is a contributor to the Mighty, a WeGo Health Award nominee, a pioneer member of the Savvy Co-op, a No Stigmas ally, a frequent contributor to Word Gathering Journal, and a 5 times so far participant in the AFSP Out of Darkness Overnight Walk for Suicide Prevention. When not focusing on advocacy, you can often find Maya traveling 6 continents and over 40 countries so far, doing yoga, hiking, enjoying nature, reading, or spending time with family, friends, and her dog Grace. As anyone who watches Crazy Talk knows, I absolutely love dog people. Maya, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry we've had some tech issues, but we are back. We're back in business, hoping I'm not jinxing it by saying that. So Maya, you do a lot of mental health advocacy work. Like that's an incredible bio. Can you tell me a little bit about, lots of people live with mental health issues and don't speak about them and don't start blogs about them. Can you tell me, why you decided to start speaking about it and blogging about it?
Sure. So I have actually had my disorder apparently since birth. I was told. So I started exhibiting symptoms when I was 2, and I was diagnosed right before my 30th birthday. And once I was diagnosed, I started looking up, trying to find as much information as I could from, of course, credible sources about my disorder. And there was basically very little to nothing because I have a rare form of a rare disorder. So I just really wanted to, I wanted to contribute. I wanted to provide opportunities for people to find information. I wanted to provide resources. And also, I think I just wanted people that maybe had gone through what I did, where they struggled for a long time and didn't have any answers, to feel like they weren't alone and to feel like they had somewhere to turn, kind of. And also just to encourage people to share their stories.
Yeah. And I think that's something we hear a lot from advocates who we kind of become the people that we wish we had in our lives. We share the stories that we wish we had known.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting to me, so you lived with your diagnosis or without your diagnosis for 28 years. Yeah. And I find that people tend to have conflicting views about their diagnosis. Some people feel a lot of relief because, suddenly so much makes sense. Some people feel, maybe they grieved a little bit when they got their diagnosis. What was that experience like for you?
So it was relief for sure. So the way I was diagnosed, was actually, I'd been going for, to different therapists and doctors and things like that for years. And I was always given, it was situational things. It was, school stress. It was, a situation with a friend or a family or whatever it was. And I kept insisting that no, I think there's something going on health-wise here. Initially, when I was very young, I was told that it was a reaction to food dye, ironically. So I spent 28 years avoiding red food dye to find out that was not accurate. So when I finally, just before I was diagnosed, I was put on a medication. I was put on an antidepressant. And I actually had a negative reaction to it because of the form of disorder I have. I'm very rapid cycling. And so that particular medication caused a negative reaction, which sent me into basically continual hypomania. And that's eventually when I finally went to see a therapist in that state, that she was in, explained what I had gone through, that I had been on this medication, and here's what had been happening, and here's how I was feeling, and my background and everything I exhibited since I was 2. She finally was able to diagnose me. So for me, it was a huge relief because I felt like I'd been searching for an answer for years, and continually telling people like something's going on, and continually not getting an answer. And that meant I couldn't really get treatment, and I couldn't start, moving forward. And once I did that, once I was able to get a diagnosis, she was able to put me, to start my treatment plan. And it just changed everything. It changed my life around. So.
Yeah, it's funny. Not funny. That's not the right word.
Yeah, no.
But I had a very similar experience where, because I have bipolar 2, so like not bipolar also, but bipolar 2, the number. But having bipolar 2, I experienced a lot more depression than mania. And so when I was put on antidepressants because my doctor thought I was depressed, I went into a really prolonged hypomanic stage as well. But I just thought that's what being happy felt like, right? Because I had been so unhappy for so long. I was like, ooh, being happy, this is where it's at. I love this. But without realizing that was actually like also symptomatic, right? Like my over the moon elation all the time was also really symptomatic. So that's really, really interesting that we had similar experiences. And I think this is something that has come up a lot in recent conversations, is this idea of medical doubt, basically. The idea of, people with positions to help us not believing what we say about ourselves. And can you talk about that a little bit more and what that experience was like for you, having everyone doubt that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think part of it, when I was 2, I think that's kind of normal. Like, 2 years old, I lived in like very rural town at the time. It was like the local doctor, and we're going back. I'm 39, so we're going back 1981 ish. Like 2-year-olds weren't diagnosed in small rural towns, weren't diagnosed with like rare mental health disorders. Like that's just not how it was. So I think that was kind of, that was, I want to say, like an honest mistake. That was something that, even in these days, like it's rare to diagnose somebody that young. And it can be so many things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it was frustrating because I think the biggest struggle for me was when somebody continually that you trust as a health professional, or that you want to trust rather, keeps telling you that, there's nothing going on, you internalize it. Like, so for me, I kept feeling it put more like kind of almost like guilt or pressure back on me, because I felt like, okay, they're saying nothing's going wrong, so like, why can't I make this better? Why can't I feel differently? Why can't I react differently? And it really pushed it back on me. And that was really difficult because you're struggling with this thing and you're seeking help, and at the same time you're questioning yourself.
Yeah. And I just want to give a shout out to Kristen Brown, who is engaging with us in the comments. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really glad to have you. If anyone is watching the show and they're like, oh, I have some questions I desperately want Lee to ask, feel free to ask them in the comments and we'll get to those as well. But Maya, you brought up something really, really important, that idea of self-doubt. Right. And especially when you live in a world that kind of tells you that what you're going through isn't real, you end up internalizing that and questioning that. And I think that can have really long lasting impacts. Like even once we get diagnosed, we can still be questioning ourselves and being like, is this me? Is this a symptom? And how do you parse those apart?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And it's funny because I also tell people the opposite, that like, my saying is that like, it's not always my illness. Sometimes you're just being a jerk or whatever. Like sometimes it really, like it really is real. It really is what's going on in life. And it's, it really is, just something that's going on with me personally, situationally, whatever. But writing and advocating has helped me a lot. Because when I do that, in order to share my feelings with other people, I tend to kind of dissect them and write them down and try to explain to other people what my illness is like and what it feels like to me and what it might look like to them. And I think in kind of breaking it down for other people, it helps break it down for myself. And I start to notice patterns over time. And I journal a lot. And so I notice that kind of thing. and also my therapist helps a ton because she can, and the people around me. Sometimes those people, your loved ones, are the best judges of noticing when, they're starting to see a mood shift or starting to see something that to them indicates you might be going into like a hypomania or a depression, or it might be your anxiety or whatever it is. But it's taken a lot of practice. It's
And it sounds like you've become very self-aware, right? Like, who you can trust, who you can rely on, who's gonna, actually be like, we care about you and, we're concerned about you, as opposed to just some rando who's like, take your meds, you're acting crazy, right? Like, you have to parse that apart. I do also want to give a shout out, lots of people engaging with us in the comments. We've got Michael Broussard, who thinks you are a true hero, which is amazing. Felicia, hey Felicia, thank you so much for tuning in. So one of the things I want to talk about is and we've kind of been dancing around this a little bit, with doctors not believing us and us kind of questioning ourselves, is this idea of stigma, right? Like, and the stigma around mental health issues in particular, but the stigma around a lot of different health issues, right? Because you also advocate for some physical health issues. So I guess my question for you is, what does that stigma look like for you? And what do you think people can do about it?
So the stigma, I think the stigma, what it tends to come out in, and honestly, like, I'm super lucky that I personally, and I know people have, so this is me personally, I haven't faced a blatant, like, I don't know, problem at a job or losing a friend or something like that. But I think it does come out, it comes out almost, I think, unintentionally. It comes out a lot of times and they're like, oh, you're always anxious, or, oh, like, aren't you feeling better yet? Or like, there's nothing to worry about. Why are you so worried about that? Or that kind of thing. And I think it's not intentional. I haven't experienced like the direct, like almost like bullying stigma. But I think a lot of times it's not really understanding, because, just like I can't understand somebody who has asthma and it is tough for them to go up a flight of stairs. They can't understand what it's like for me to have my disorder, not having it. So I think that a lot of times it just looks almost like doubt or like frustration, not even with me, but with the situation, or just kind of not really understanding and not knowing what to do. And I think honestly, the best we can do is we can be open about it. We can talk about it. And, sometimes what I've had to tell people is like, I don't always need a solution. Sometimes I need you to let me be. I need you to let me be me, do my thing, even if it doesn't make sense to you, as long as it's not like harmful to me or anything. But, and just, sometimes I just need you to let it happen. And, if you're not sure how I'm feeling or you have a question, like ask a question. But, just try to let it be.
That feeling of like, I don't need you to fix me. Like, I just need you to be my friend through this process, or my partner through this process, or whatever it is. And Kristen also commented and said, I love your writing and advocacy. Big fan of yours, which is amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about, you've touched on it, like the writing piece. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in writing, and really where you talked about the power of writing being in being able to parse apart your thoughts, and maybe the community that you found there. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I come from writing. Honestly, my dad is a book editor. So it's kind of something that I've grown up with. It's writing to me is second nature. I'm an introvert, so it's way easier for me to write things out than to talk things out sometimes. But as far as how I got into it, it started just for me. It started with me journaling, and then I was like, you know what? Like, maybe I'll start and write a blog just to kind of like get my thoughts out. That's honestly how it started. Like, let me get this stuff out of my head because there's so much in there, and let me put it out onto like virtual paper. And, it actually helped me start to clear my head a little bit. And, it's almost like I just, that like Harry Potter drawing thoughts out of your head thing. That's kind of how it felt. And I started with that. And then I'd get people saying like, oh, I experienced that too. Or like, hey, I thought I was the only one that had to deal with that. Or, and people coming to me that like I really didn't expect. Like, I don't know, people I knew in middle school and had reconnected with on Facebook and saying, hey, that meant a lot that you shared that. and I didn't even know they were reading what I had written. So then I kind of started to fine tune my focus a little bit more and to actively, like, intentionally blog about mental health and to advocate that way. And I've just found an amazing community. The chronic illness community and the mental health community is wonderful. I think so often they're the people I go to when I'm just feeling really bad or I'm feeling something that I'm like, nobody else is going to get this except somebody who goes through it. And it's really been a comfort to me that you can just kind of put it out there and there's going to be somebody else out there that says, I get it. I'm there. I've been there. Like, I understand.
Yeah. And that feeling of like not having to go through it alone, right? Like when we know that there's a community out there. And it's interesting because today's World Mental Health Day. Right. And so I had a Facebook memory pop up. Yeah. And it was 5 years ago today that I started doing mental health advocacy. And it started with a Facebook post. It started with me writing like, by the way, I live with what was at that point diagnosed as depression and I'm recovering from an eating disorder and all this sort of stuff. And I just wrote it on Facebook. And you were right. People totally just come out of the woodwork. Like people who I hadn't spoken to in years were like, thank you for writing that. And there's something very, very powerful about people knowing that they're not alone, yes. Right? And I think that that's really a lot of the work that we do as advocates, right? Is just kind of being like, by the way, you're not alone. Like there are other people out here. And that's really amazing in the age of the internet. People, because I know you do a lot of social media stuff and people often bash social media, right? Like people are like, oh, social media, like, kids these days kind of thing. But social media can be a really powerful tool for us to get that message across if you're not alone. Is that something you found? Absolutely.
Absolutely. My, shortly after starting, like fine tuning my blog, I started the Facebook group. And I did it just because I felt like, maybe there were people that didn't want to write something in the comments, or maybe somebody had something that they wanted to talk about privately, but like I couldn't necessarily address it. It wasn't something directly that I'd experienced, but that other people might want some sort of a safe space to share. And so I started that. And I that slowly grew. And then I started doing more on my Twitter and my Instagram and things like that. And I've just found the most amazing community through it. It's really like, even today I think I tweeted out about like how amazing my Spoonie family is. Because I was just having a tougher morning and I just needed kind of some support and everybody was there and it was amazing. It's really, you're right. Like people bash social media, but it's also, and I think it makes it a safe space because it can be really tough to sit down with somebody that you've known for a long time, like face to face. And you're wondering like, how is this going to change this, whatever it is, friendship or family relationship or business relationship, whoever it is. And on social media, it's like so many of us connect that way that it's built in.
Yeah.
It's like people know my blog from the get-go. Like I share it all over the place. Like if somebody doesn't want to interact with me because of my disorder or for whatever reason, like they're going to know up front, like they're not even going to approach me. It's not like, so it helps. It's, we connect through that and it takes away a lot of that worry about talking about it. And we can just kind of be open and honest about it.
Yeah. And I found the same thing. Like, I'm very out there. Like, here's my blog, here's my Twitter, here's everything that I've been through. And one of the things that's kind of been bubbling up for me lately is this idea of, once it's out there, you can't really go back. And a lot of us, I know there are a lot of people who are full-time advocates and that's amazing, but there are a lot of people who have lives outside of advocacy as well. And, we have jobs or we have school or we have whatever. And is that something that you ever find yourself concerned with? Is that, the cat's out of the bag and it can never go back in?
Yes and no. So not in relation to my general disorder, because I'm so about advocating that I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't want people in my life that have a problem with this. Like, but I do, one of the things I intentionally do is there are times that I intentionally write from a raw place. So whether I know I'm in a bad depression or I'm severely anxious or I'm in a bad hypomanic episode, I intentionally write from there because I think it can be easy to kind of like sum it all up with a nice little bow after the fact and like, here's my 10 tips for getting through this, which is awesome. But also like, I think sometimes it doesn't portray what it's really like to people. And I think for people going through it, it doesn't connect quite as well. So sometimes I purposely write from a really raw place. and I absolutely save it as a draft and reread it a bunch of times before I post it. And sometimes I will like wait a few hours, or if I really in a rough spot, like wait a day or something before posting it to make sure, like, was I ranting or was I really like writing something useful? Which, I mean, a rant can be fine too, but like, did I just need to get that out, and should that not be for public consumption? Or, is this a message that I want to go out? And like, I'd say 9.9 times out of 10, I actually publish it. But yeah, there are times that I'm iffy if, like, how's this going to go over? Or, oh, maybe I shouldn't have written that. But honestly, it's my biggest thing is that I worry about the concern of other people. Like if I'm just having a really rough day and I write something, like I'm like, oh, like my parents are going to read that and they're going to be so worried. And like, I'm feeling better now. Like I'm rapid cycling, like I'm good. Like, so it's almost more out of a concern for like, oh, people are going to be really worried. And like, I just kind of needed to get that out.
Yeah. And I think that balance, that's something that I've been trying to strike in my own business, is kind of the way I phrase is stories that are true and stories that are helpful. Because I always tell stories that are true, but are all true stories helpful? Right. And I think you phrased it perfectly when you said, is this something that needs to be put out there for public consumption? And I don't think there's always a right answer about that, because sometimes I'll put something out and people really respond to it well. And I'm like, ooh, I almost didn't put that out. Or I'll put something out and, people don't respond to it well. And I'm like, well, we'll reconsider the next time. And you know what? It's I think always a learning process. And I think it's really incredible that you're doing the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you.
So we've got a lovely comment from Felicia, who said, I've heard this once. I've been told sometimes the most healing thing to do is remind ourselves over and over other people feel this too. And I think that really ties in a lot with the conversation that we were having. And I think that ties in a lot with the work that you do. And I can't believe that we're out of time, which is wild. It goes by fast.
It does.
So thank you so much for being on the show, Maya. So for people who are tuning in, whether you're watching live or you're watching the replay, if they want to hear more about the work that you're doing, if they want to read the work that you've been writing, where can people do that?
Yeah, sure. So I actually have two. So my personal blog, where I blog my soul out, is it's Lilies and Elephants, just like it sounds. I know it's weird. I just like lilies and elephants. So it's liliesandelephants.blogspot.com. I'm probably the only person that blogs about mental health at Lilies and Elephants, so you can probably Google it as well. And my Spread Hope project is spreadhopeproject.com. I'm on social media. I think I'm under Maya Northen. It's like Northern, but without the second R. Northen. On Twitter and Facebook. Facebook, you can probably find either. And then I do Spread Hope Project on Instagram as well. So I have a lot of different social medias. They all link to each other probably, so that you can probably, if you find them, you'll find most of them.
Yeah, awesome. And we will put the links to some of the ones that you mentioned. We'll put them in the comments below. So it's going to take us a couple minutes after the end of the show, so they're not in there yet. But if you're watching the replay, then the links are probably in the comments. And if you're watching it live, we'll put the links in the comments like 10 minutes after the end of the show, I promise. So again, Maya, thank you so much for being on the show. I really, really, really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation, and you just have a fantastic energy. I'm so glad that we managed to work through our tech difficulties.
Me as well.
And if you're watching the show and you're thinking, wow, Crazy Talk is so much fun, I want to get episodes of Crazy Talk directly to my inbox, you can do that by signing up for my mailing list at leethomas.ca. And I'm also going to put a link to the mailing list sign up in the comments below after the show. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. Thank you, everyone who's watching the replay. And thank you again, Maya, for being on the show. It was great having you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.